Thank you, Alokji and Maanas, for gracing our platform the third time over. I'm sure it's some kind of a record. So every time, I must say, it's been quite a memorable experience. And today, on our 148th episode, we are again going to create some memories with the recently released, and I really love the book, Fangs of Death. This is the chilling true story of Kerala's most infamous snake bite murder. To the people who have joined us today, though Alokji and Manas, they are not new on our platform, but I must introduce you a little bit. Alokji has served 37 years in the police, rising to the rank of Director General. He has been a TEDx speaker, a gold medalist from IIT. He's won 2 president's most prestigious medals, and he's been the festival director with Crime Literature Festival in Dehradun, I think. Yeah. So this is something new that we are seeing that both of you doing, right? And he's authored the book, The Barabanki Narcos, and co-authored with Maanas several books now, I must say, Murder in the Bylanes and On the Trails of Thugs and Thieves. And coming to Maanas, he's such a prolific person, as I've always maintained, columnist, again a TEDx speaker, such a wonderful singer. He's also an artist. He's been painting. He's been training people all across. So welcome to India's most favorite crime writing duo, Alokji and Maanas.
Thank you so much.
What a pleasure to be here, indeed. Absolutely.
And thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I must congratulate Trends on 148 episodes. What an achievement. It's so wonderful that your work has been growing and has been reaching a wider audience. I'm so glad because I know that this channel is run in the right spirit and truly promotes the written word. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And you both have been part of our journey all throughout.
Yes,
meeting today, and I'm sure many more to come. We look forward to having many more books from your end. So starting with you, Maanas, why did you, how did you come across writing this case? How did it happen? I'm sure Fangs of Death, this title itself, it gives you a little bit of a creepy feeling, but when you come across and you read the book and you find that it's against the backdrop of rather this true story of the spine-chilling murder. So I would like to know how did you write this and when did you really come across this case?
Several reasons, ma'am, for writing this. The first being that a link was sent across by a literary agent at the Book Bakers on our group about this case. And he was wondering if we could do a book on it. And I had a look at the basics of the case. And what attracted me most was the fact that this book is about a snake bite murder. The reason is that snakes are often seen as the villains in pop culture and everywhere else. When the snake is involved, then usually the plot is that the snake is evil and the snake hunts down a prey or deliberately attacks a human being, or snakes are very aggressive. Since I was a kid, I've always had this unadulterated love for snakes. I have made scrapbooks about snakes. I have watched shows on snakes. So the reason for me to write this book was actually to tell people that when these fangs of death are used by human beings, then they're extremely dangerous. But snakes are kind creatures, and we must understand their importance in the ecosystem. So that was the first thing which caught my eye, that a snake has been used as a murder weapon. And then I read about this trend across the country where snakes were being used as murder weapons because the trail of evidence left behind for the police and then later for the courts is very thin, because of which a lot of perpetrators tend to get away. So how this investigation was pieced together once we started reading up on that. And then my co-author got in touch with one of his batchmates, a legendary officer in Kerala, Mr. Jacob Punnos. He sent across some material about the case. Then we got in touch with the team. And as we kept learning more and more about the case, it kept getting more fascinating. So we thought that we must pen a book on this.
It's a wonderfully written book, very engaging. I could finish it in one sitting. But Alokji, how was it for you, sitting outside a case and looking at it? You are a celebrated cop, right? And this, from a perspective of a celebrated cop that you are, how did you feel about it? And were you surprised at the main protagonist, the main, I would say, the criminal Suraj? I mean, or after seeing so much that you've seen so many cases in your life, this did not really surprise you? How was it with you? I mean, how did you see the case from your perspective?
The first part of your question, yes, it was indeed a very different experience.
Yeah.
Getting material from some other source.
Yes.
In my earlier books, the material was here and I could reproduce it.
Yeah.
But in this case, indeed, leaning on the friendships that I have in Kerala, I could get a lot of material. And in our dedication of the book, you would have noticed that we have said that to the silent but telling contributions
Yes.
of forensic experts in solving crime. So when I read about this crime, I said, oh my God, what a great contribution has been made by this particular team, this particular team of scientists. So it doesn't often happen that we have such wonderful scientists helping us out. And then we go another step and include the prosecution staff. You would have read about the meeting the prosecutor Mohan Raj
Yes.
with our investigator Ashok. And Ashoka and Mohan Raj then come up with the idea that has been described in the book. So what I'm trying to say is that from an outside view, I would say that this was one of the finest examples of not just investigation, but a teamwork of these three entities. And thank God the judge was somebody who was looking to dispense justice rather than looking at those aspects which technically would have made the case weak. So all said and done, when justice is delivered like this, I'm very happy. And so there was learning also in this for me, despite the fact that I have served for nearly 4 decades as a cop.
Yes.
I could learn a lot of things from this episode. So wonderful.
I know, rarest of rare case. And I think the punishment which was meted out in the end, I think the person deserved it. I'll not go deeply into it. I would like people to really go through the sequence. But Manas, how does it feel? I mean, you have a case here which really hogged a lot of media highlight. There were a lot of people following it from 2020 and then 2021 October. So what was the challenges you really faced, in putting everything together? Because the case was there in the newspapers. But yes, not as, you've really taken so much of pains, given all the sides, the forensic, the investigation, the court trials. So how was it? I mean, how difficult did you find and how challenging did you find writing this one, at least, where it is already in the public eye not so long ago?
When a case is so widely discussed, then it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, people already know about it. So at least in Kerala, they are very interested to read about it. And in fact, the Kerala press has been very kind to us. So once the book was released, a flood of articles came out in Malayalam talking about the book, and it was really lapped up by the audience in Kerala. So that readership knows this case very well. And therefore, it becomes a challenge because you have to get all your facts right. But you also have to present the book in a way which reads new. Which presents the case in a way which is meant for a book and not for a report or a newspaper article.
Yes.
And so creating a gripping book with scenarios where the reader feels like it's a true crime book and not an article or a piece of information which has been pieced together was indeed a challenge. That's the first part of it. So the writing skill involved and the amount of time that one took to conceptualize each chapter, because you cannot really take too much liberty since it's a true story. So sticking to the non-fiction grain is also extremely important. So that was one challenge. And the other challenge associated with this is that people tend to judge this book very harshly because they already have their own perspective on the crime.
Yeah.
So if we make any personal comment in the book, it is looked at from that perspective. So if I write, say, for instance, that I believe the punishment was right or I believe the punishment was wrong, then that opinion is scrutinized by the reader because they also have their own take on the same question already, and they have had it for a while. The other part of it, the advantage is that if a book is already is on a subject which is already well known, then the chances of it selling better, of it being showcased better by bookstores is definitely there. And I think one of the reasons we landed a good publisher in Amaryllis is also because this story was already widely discussed, and they immediately also took up the rights for the Malayalam book, which should be out soon. So it's very interesting that how everything has come together.
Yes, we are expecting the Malayalam version in July.
Okay. So maybe some other versions too might follow after that. Maybe
Fingers crossed.
see it maybe on TV sometime, maybe kind of a documentary or something.
Let's hope so, ma'am.
Yes. But Alokji, I mean, why do you think, I mean, knowing from you, because you are the technical person, so as to speak. So why do you think the prosecution was so intent on classifying this crime as rarest of?
The fact that we have written a book about this, and you earlier used this phrase,
Yes.
rarest of rare, is because it's a rare case. How many cases have we seen in this huge country where an animal has been used
Yes.
as the murder weapon? So at some place we have written it's a breathing and it's a moving, alive
Very difficult.
murder weapon.
Yeah.
And to use it so ingeniously as this man did, unfortunately, so evil as he is, ultimately the result makes for hair-raising experiences. So I personally feel that this story needed to be told for the simple reason that, see, this is also a possibility. And so people should be very aware and very careful about what can happen. And it's the rarest of rare cases. That's what the demand was. That the evil in the man, the fact that he killed his wife, the fact that the wife was relatively less abled, and finally the fact that the case actually went all the way and was won by the prosecution. So these things don't often happen. The prosecution success rates in murder cases is very low. It is in single digits in some states. So you can understand that this is a case which must be considered as a rare case, rarest of rare cases.
Yes, but to add on to what he said, obviously the prosecution wanted to classify it as rarest of rare because of the brutality of the crime and the evil mind of the perpetrator.
Yeah, and the intent. I mean, he looked like a simple guy, but the way he planned it, and he was so focused on, I mean,
oh my God, yes.
I don't know what to say or what not to, because I don't want to give away a lot of things in this book. So,
yes, absolutely.
But Alok and maybe then Alokji and then Manas, maybe about the psychological profile of the perpetrator. What do you think? I mean, you've come across so many criminals. You as a cop, and then Manas as a co-author and perhaps the main author of the book this time. So, how do you think what do you think the psychological profile of such criminals is like? It's very, very difficult to unveil such people.
Neeta, the criminals often do not look picture that you expect them to look like. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling with words here, but what I mean to say is that sometimes the criminals surprise you. They look the simplest, they look the coolest. In this case, it's a cold-blooded murder. You can see that the planning was going on in his head. And finally, he used a cold-blooded animal to conduct the act. So what I'm trying to say is that of course, it's a psychological study where you see that if the man has criminal intent, if he has the criminal intent, what will be his style of acting upon that intent. So all that was there. But in this case, a husband who was expected to protect his wife goes on to, you can read from the book that from day one he was planning and he was trying to secure for this purpose a snake. He got the services of Suresh and others to go on with the idea that he had in his mind. So definitely a cold-blooded murderer who knew what he wanted to do, and he had a plan.
Very vicious plan, I must say, which just keeps on unfolding itself. And how about you, Manas? What do you think?
For me, as somebody who has not dealt with criminals in
Yeah,
professional life,
really. Yeah.
it was extremely scary in a way to write about a person who was living in an exclusively evil space of mind. I think I've written this somewhere in the book. He would stop at nothing. And this was his wife that we were talking about. That's why there are these little snippets of his psychological profile, which I have put here and there in the book, because I felt like he would stop at nothing and he had to commit this murder. There's a place in the book where I talk about the failed attempt on Uttara's life.
Yeah.
Where I say that criminal intent sometimes supersedes all notions of logic. The insatiability of some criminal minds only ends after committing the final act. Suraj was caught in a similar infinite loop of bloodlust. There is no better deterrent for a prospective murderer than a failed attempt, but Suraj was living in an exclusively evil space of mind. His wife Uttara was the clearly identifiable victim of his rage, and he would stop at nothing. So I think this pretty much sums up his psychological makeup.
Yes. And during the research of the book, how did it go with you? I mean, what was your main focus? I mean, you knew from the beginning, from the reports and everything, that he's the main culprit. So how did it go with you? I mean, at some point of time, were you thinking perhaps his, I mean, how challenging, in a way, how challenging was it for you to find out and do the research and find out about him more as a person? Because you've really gone to all the extents of pointing out about his. I mean, he's a criminal, yes. He's also a guy who's taking the dowry from his in-laws, though they are in dire financial need. So everything about this character was vicious.
Yes. It was actually very interesting to research him. It's ironic that I use the word interesting, but it's also because you have never really thought in that space. And so when as a writer, you step into those shoes and try and imagine how things were happening. It's a whole new world which you see. And you wonder how people manage to have this kind of mindset and how they lead a life where they can actually be so selfish, so self-centered, to the extent that they can actually sacrifice their closest family members. So the research was a little tricky. The other part of it, ma'am, which I thought was a real challenge, was that since the subject is well known and it's not exactly a whodunit right from the outset, people know who the murderer is. So the thrill and the suspense had to be created in a different way, because this is not a cops and robbers game where the cops are chasing after a robber. Instead, they already have the criminal, and that is where the book begins. So it's extremely challenging to build from there, and to use the research or the material available accordingly. So I'm glad that a lot of members of the Kerala police were very forthcoming with information. Obviously, the court transcripts were also available, and it was because of the help by the Kerala police that we were able to piece together such a thorough account.
So how was it with you, Alok? I mean, you were writing this book once again with Maanas, and what were the discussions like? What was it like to be discussing the characters? I mean, it must have been, how many days did you take together to write this book? You know, it's very interesting to find out from you. How did the process go? Both of you must have had your arguments, share of your arguments during discussions, share of perhaps, share of arguments.
We have said in the book at some place that Maanas always found snakes very fascinating.
Yes, right in the beginning.
From his childhood, he was looking at snakes not exactly as villains.
Yes. Making scrapbooks and everything.
As creatures who have their own reasons to behave the way they do. And the provocation in many cases is provided by those they attack. So this is one aspect of the entire writing we had in our mind. And I don't know if this comes through in the book or not. We have tried to say that the intent of the criminal is far greater than the venom that a snake carries. So venom the snake carries, yes, but not used for purposes like the one that has been used in this. So when we were writing this book, we were always all through very conscious that we should not paint snakes as villains. I hope we have been able to do that in this book. And secondly, as always happens, we are two in a team, and the teams do not always create the right noises. So some of the noises that we would have created might have bothered my wife in the next room. So yes, of course. But
And I can say this for the first time that through the editing, some of the noises would have bothered my wife also. So
I'm sure I was going to say that now there is one more addition in the family.
yes, yes. So I think the last part of the book when it was being edited, that was after my marriage. So I'm sure that my wife Gitanjali also has a few things to say about the noises we made. But by and large, I think this was more amicable than the other books. What do you think?
yeah. And the other thing is that you asked the time factor.
Yeah.
I must honestly confess that this is not the only book we were writing at this point of time.
Okay. That's
So
very nice.
we were working on two other scripts as well.
Lovely.
So this particular one,
Hmm.
if we want to say starting on such and such date, ending on such and such date, Manas, 12 books?
At least 1 year, yes.
At least one, yeah, yes.
Of writing.
Of
And
writing and then editing, of course.
yes.
And then getting it through to the publisher who took it up
Yes.
very willingly because of the nature and also because of the fact that your books, Touchwood, have been doing so well. And I'm sure both of you don't have anything to prove. It's just the story that you finally bring forward. And I'm sure it gets published.
The readers have been kind to us, very kind to us.
Indeed. And so have publishers and
Your
also
agent is
grateful to our agent at the book bakers. It's all a team effort.
But I'm sure. So, how does it feel for the relationships? You feel with each and every book you are growing together, and you are. How does it happen, Manas?
It's very interesting. When we started off,
Hmm.
then I think we
You were in
were
the bylines.
getting used to each other as writers.
Okay.
No, actually, even before that. So I was very closely involved with the Barabanki Narcos. I did not write the book, but
Okay.
at least the editing and the brainstorming. And so the teamwork pretty much began there.
You
Then
be
came
the inspiration always, pushing him to write the books and everything. Yeah.
that is something he says, which is extremely kind.
He got after me, actually.
Then starting with Murder in the Bylanes, when I started writing with him officially, became a co-author. Things were pretty tricky initially because we had very different styles as writers and very different takes on subjects. So it was a little difficult to get along with my own father. That's how I felt for the first time in my life, because otherwise we have really been very close friends. And but now there is that ease even in this equation. So I think it's much easier, even when we are not, in the same city, or we are in two separate places. We know how the other person is going to construct a certain part of a chapter. So we can write from two distant locations also now and piece it together later. It almost always falls in place. So luckily this partnership has grown, and so has our equation. So it's a beautiful coming of age of sorts for the partnership.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
I'm sure. And with two more books and many more to go, I'm sure. There have been a lot of readers on our platform who knew that you're coming on the platform. So they started sending their questions to you. One of them is my own daughter, Dia, and she also is very interested in writing and also in crime stories. So she wanted to know from either of you or both of you that how does one write an interesting crime story? Especially if it is true, that also, if it is true. I mean, if you're making it up, it's different, but writing a true story, because you've been writing true stories.
Writing a true story.
How do you write an interesting true crime story? It's an audience question from here.
How do you write an interesting? First of all, the crime has to be interesting. It cannot be a routine crime. Secondly, I think one has to immerse oneself into the records, the police station records, and the background of the witnesses, the background of the criminal, the background of the victim.
Hmm.
All those things actually make the story. It's not as if somebody killed somebody makes the story, but why was the killing done? How was it carried out? Who are the people who can tell us the facts about the case, the witnesses? And then ultimately building a case which is impregnable in a court of law. So if we are able to tell through our book all these steps convincingly to the reader, I think the reader will be very happy, especially in whodunit cases. I think there's a lot to be said about keeping the secret till the end, keeping the fact of who done it till the very end, or keeping the or the reader confused till the end. So I think these are factors which have to be kept in mind while writing about crime. In this case, in the Fangs of Death, as we have been saying, this case was known. That the entire case was widely reported in press and the media otherwise. So we didn't have this luxury of telling it in the end that who did it.
Yes.
So in this, it was a different challenge. It was a different challenge, and you would have seen that there is a chapter which is purely technical, explaining what is the difference
Yes.
between two sections of the CRPC. Now,
Yes.
the Criminal Procedure Code in itself, for any lay reader, a very boring document. Who will like to read the code? So, to tell people what is the difference between two sections and what is the fine distinction that comes into play when we are recording this evidence. All these things were very important, I think, because one of the readers who has made a review of the book, she says that she was not only that she was riveted to the rest of the book, she says she learned a lot from the book because there were chapters like this.
Yes.
Which
No doubt.
told her about how the police goes about an investigation and what are the challenges on the legal side of it, the procedural side of it. So that's why I think it was a good idea. We were discussing if we should have a chapter like this. 1 to 4 is the name of the question of the chapter. So should we have a thing like this? Will the reader be very bored? Will the reader remain glued to the book even through this chapter? But these reviews, early reviews, are okay for us. They're giving us the confidence that yes, we have done the right thing.
To pick up from where he left, he asked himself questions just now that will this be good for the reader? Will it keep the reader hooked? I think those are questions you have to ask yourself at every step of writing a crime book. And also, maintaining the flow is sometimes difficult between one chapter and the other in a non-fiction story.
Yes.
And that is one of the key things we focus on, at least as a team. And as far as this particular book is concerned, since it's not a whodunit, making it interesting becomes all the more challenging. So the detail is what matters. I think the grip in any piece of writing is in the extent of detail which one is able to capture, and the in a way visual telling of a story. While the reader is reading a crime story, that reader should be able to imagine themselves in the place of a criminal or a cop or one of the characters in the story. So I at least use that as a yardstick. That do I feel like I am present in the place of this interrogator or this criminal when I am reading the book?
And the atmosphere is very important. Now, we have different places in the book. One is the place where the protagonist grew up. There is this criminal where what was his background in his growth. And we have different places where the crime was committed, not just one place. In this case also, you have seen that the planning was at one place, the execution of the case was at another. Two houses are involved here. And then the atmospherics of the parents.
Yes.
What was their background? What were they facing? What did they say in the girl who died? So the atmosphere of the entire, now police station atmosphere, for instance. Now I've described that how a sub-inspector who had gone to a particular river to take a bath was pulled out of his slumber in a way to come back and start duties. Now, these are things that keep happening with us in the police.
So right.
At times when I left home and said I'll be back for dinner, I came back for a dinner which was on the third day after that.
Hmm.
So these things happen with policemen, that they don't know what is going to happen next. So these things have to be described in a book. I think any writer who writes on crime has to look at the investigator very closely, because life of an investigator, especially in the way the law is made, especially in the way the witnesses behave, and also, if I may say so, the judiciary is very particular about proving a crime to the hilt,
Hmm.
and it has to be hilt. And so that is one of those things which makes the entire writing also very interesting, that how do you take it to that point where nobody has any doubt about it,
including the reader.
including the reader.
So, right, and with your four decades of experience in this, I suppose all these small things, I suppose, really add up and they really make the book very interesting. I have one more question from Alka Khanna, who's again a very regular on our platforms, and she's read mostly all your books. But first question you've also already answered. How does it feel to be writing yet another book with your father, Manas? But I think that's you've answered already. But how do you take to the byline which goes with both of you as the India's leading crime writing father-son duo? So how do you take to that byline?
Would you like to take that?
You first.
Mother.
Well, thank you, Alka ji, for that question, and thank you for being a reader. I think that's nothing more
That's very
valuable than a
important for
reader.
us, yes.
This line which says India's favorite crime writing duo, I feel very flattered every time I read it. I wonder if I deserve it or if we deserve it. But this started with our previous publishers,
Okay.
because they told us that they cannot think of another more popular Indian crime writing duo.
No doubt.
And
But
so
elsewhere in the world, I think I've
That's-
not read a father-son writing books together for that matter, or perhaps.
yes, that is in itself unique. So they're pretty sure there is no father-son duo writing together. This we have heard quite a few times, not just
Yes.
in crime but across the literary space. But in this case, because we are focusing on crime, they were pretty sure that there is no other crime writing duo which is consistently written together
Yes.
and has been able to garner the kind of readership we have. So it was very kind of them to put this on the cover of the previous book. And now I think it has caught on. So I'm hopeful that other publishers like Amaryllis will continue using this byline, because it certainly doesn't harm us. And I'm very grateful to our readers and also to our publishers for saying this. I don't feel that I deserve this yet, but I'm very glad. And I think the other half of this duo can answer this question now.
Yes, I don't know why he's saying that we don't deserve it. Without meaning to be pompous, I should say that, as you said, there are no other duos writing
Yes.
crime
Yeah.
or writing much more. I mean, I don't think in
So
any,
there are duos writing crime, but
yeah,
I'm not
yes, father,
same
son, and
I think
see,
anywhere in the world, I have not come across.
the great advantage we have is that I have so many stories stored up here. So then from childhood, he has seen me as a cop. So some of the impressions that he carried about the kind of work that we did also help in us coming together to be writing. You know, I have the luck of being somebody who has seen it all and has been in the middle of it all with a bystander who is watching me from outside in a way. So the two of us together had to make a team. And I thought that luckily both of us have the ability to put across what we want to say. So this has been a great gift to us. And so the two of us can help each other come up with books. It's nice, and readers like it. Wonderful.
And the acceptance which
Very
gets us
reasons.
this moniker of India's favorite crime writing duo, I think we can only say thank you
This is
to
a very,
readers.
very valuable moniker, I must say.
Yes.
So, anything more that you would like to discuss on the book? Any last words on the book? I know it's a work of passion. It's a work which is really intriguing. I've read the book and I've been encouraging people to read it because it's very interesting. And today we have gone through the whole process of writing this book. I have not given the story because people should read entirely and then find out basic story they know, but the way it's been written is, I mean, you should read it, you should review on it, and that is the biggest gift to the authors and biggest gift to Alokji and Manas.
The final endorsement, of course, comes from the readers.
Yes.
And one of the readers is a very celebrated author, Hussein Zaidi. Of course, you know him. And so he has written a very, very telling sentence about the book. A remarkable example of writing intricately about police procedure without compromising on thrill. Now, this is very important. Here in this book, as we have been saying, everything was known. It's no whodunit. And yet, to be able to tell the procedures in one of the chapters, we have just discussed law. I think this has been very gratifying. And to find an endorsement from Hussein Zaidi has been quite wonderful. There are other author readers who have said good things about the book. I think you have one from Anirban Bhattacharya, who is such a popular writer. And he has also given us an endorsement.
Yes.
Yes. For me, the thing I'll say to any potential reader is that this book is not about a story where we were involved ourselves, unlike our previous books.
Yeah.
But it's such an intense storyline and such an important story that we felt very consumed by it. And I'm sure as readers, you'll understand the gravity of the crime. This is not an ordinary crime. This is a crime where an evil man does something extremely evil to his own wife and uses a snake as a murder weapon.
Yeah.
And then the police comes in and pieces together a case based entirely on circumstantial evidence and manages to get this landmark verdict. So it's something which is unprecedented in the history of this country as far as criminal investigation is concerned, and has now become a subject for a lot of criminology 101 textbooks. So instead of reading it in a textbook format, I would always say that go for this book because it's gripping, it's very heartfelt, and I hope that at the end of it, you have some respect for this creature which is on the cover. Because
Maanas is extremely fond of. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Two last questions, actually. I missed out on taking them. I think we still have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
This is from ex-defense person, Major Neha. Now she's working with Amazon. How do you balance factual accuracy with compelling storytelling in true crime writing?
Of course, this is always something that we have to think about because A, it's a true story. B, it's a well-known story. Yet it had to be made interesting. So the atmospherics become very important in this. How we bring in, like in a chapter, we have described how the interrogation room looked. And what was the impact of switching off the fan? What was the impact of a little drama on the part of the investigator? Now, all these things had to be imagined, obviously. But then this is what makes it gripping. So to my mind, one has to bring in such elements, may or may not be exactly true, or maybe actually they're happening, but then who looks at these things when you're writing about such a major crime? You tend to overlook these things. So I think in describing a crime which is well known, these things become very important. And these glue together the facts in a very interesting way. They make a compelling story ultimately. I think it's very important to add things which are not exactly out of the police records. In police records, they will not say that we switched off the fan. But in the book, when you read that the fan was switched off in somewhere like this, then obviously the reader will know what was happening there. So these are things which make a book interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So in the smallest details, you can sometimes take the liberty of adding a thing or two of your own. But what's extremely important is that the truth as it is conveyed in terms of the decision of the court or the investigators, must be retained wholly or substantially in the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one more question, last question, we take it up before we wind up for the day, is from Rashmi Raizada, and she says that she loved the cover of the book. So, who was behind this?
Yes, it's a wonderful book. And we must thank our publishers for having come up with this wonderful cover. And I must say, Maanas was continuously in touch with the designers and all. We had other options also. And finally, this was selected. And this comment from Rashmi is also made by others. That this is such a wonderful cover. Right from the beginning, when we unveiled the cover of the book, people have been saying, oh, what a wonderful cover it is. So we must thank the publishers again for finding the right designers.
Yes, in fact, one very interesting thing which happened with me was that I was in this very well-known bookstore in Gurugram.
Okay.
And I saw a reader enter and see this book and pick it up immediately.
Yes.
Since I was there, so I asked the reader, why did you pick up this book? And they said it stood out on the bookshelf.
Yes.
They saw the snake and found it extremely interesting. So I am very grateful to Marilis for the way they've pieced together this cover.
Yes.
There's a lot of detail. The way the S is written, and also the color in which the true story of the Kerala snakebite murder is written.
Is the color of the venom, actually, the color which has been used here.
So every small element
Yeah.
in the book is thought through, and that stands true for the cover also. So I'm very grateful to the publishers for going into such depth.
Not just the cover, Neeta, inside also you would see that when chapters start, they use a snake scale.
Yes.
Scale to show that.
Yes, because I can understand the way Manas has said that the reaction from the person who entered the book. Then as soon as I put the program on the social media, there were a lot of people who said, oh, this looks very interesting. We should read this. So I suppose that is also a lot of, the cover needs to be really as attractive so that people can, buy it immediately and go through the book. And of course,
that's why we didn't put our picture on it.
So that would have also made it sense, don't worry. But thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation as always. I have enjoyed talking to you, as I'm sure you have, because we always love creating memories with your books. So from best-selling crime writers, Aloke Lal and Maanaslal, based on official records, evidence collection, and court transcripts, here comes the true story of really, I would say, spine-chilling crime, Kerala's most infamous snake bite murder. It's a page-turner, Fangs of Death. It gives the phrase, murdered in cold blood, a horrific new dimension. Thank you so much, both of you, for gracing our platform. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neeta. You have been
such a
so
pleasure.
kind.
Thank you.
You have been inviting us, and so look forward to meet you again after the next books are out.
Definitely, no doubt about that.
And a big shout out to you and the whole team at Trends Literature Festival for the service you're doing to literature and the written word. We are very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's definitely a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.